Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. I am so excited to be sharing this conversation with you. It is with my dear friend and one of the astrologers whose work has been so deeply influential to me and my work, Britten LaRue. You may know Britten. Britten and I have collaborated on multiple projects in the past, and you may have even heard her on the podcast. In this episode, we are discussing a very exciting new framework that Britten is teasing out and creating teachings around called Underdog to Diva. And I am so excited when she asked me to create this episode with her, create this conversation. There is a part 1 to this conversation, which is on Britten's podcast, Moon to Moon, called Underdog to Diva, and I will make sure to link all of it in the show notes below. And you may want to go back to that episode after listening to this episode if you happen to find this episode first, because that episode is where Britten really teases out from the ground up this concept of Underdog to Diva. But I trust that if you found this episode first, you can let yourself explore this concept through our conversation spaces, which is always so inspiring. I feel like each time I get to speak with Britten, there are sparks flying for sure. And so this conversation was also very deep for me. I really felt the impact of the transformative quality that this conversation has, because the day after, I was just noticing places within myself that previously maybe held some shame around some of these stickier, more saturated concepts that was illuminated upon and that kind of opened up. And that opening was not really something I expected going into this conversation, but there's really a transformational quality, I think, to our exploration here. So I can't wait to have you listen to our conversation. But before that, let me share with you Britten's bio in case you don't know her work. Britten LaRue, MA, is a public astrologer, author, teacher, and intuitive guide. A self-described recovering academic, she left behind a 20-year career in art history to reinvent herself at midlife. Britten is known and loved by her community for modeling what it looks like to live from one's dream field. Creator of emergence astrology, Britten's deepest calling is to be a midwife for those in the process of birthing their own inner knowing, healing from shame, and learning to trust themselves again with the reckless freedom they deserve. Her first book, Living Astrology: How to Weave the Wisdom of the 12 Signs into Your Everyday Life, was recently released in March 2024. She is a Pisces Sun, Capricorn Moon, and Aries Rising. You can find Britten online at BrittenLaRue.com or at Britten LaRue. So, a little bit about this current framework that Britten and I are going to be sharing in this conversation. It is actually a 3-part offering. So, part 1 is the podcast episode in Britten's podcast, Moon to Moon, introducing the intellectual and energetic scaffolding of the concept. Part 2 is this conversation that Britten is having with me in this podcast. And part 3 is the paid offering, which includes a 3-hour live transmission on May 9th, which is from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And it will be recorded and shared after. There will be a pre-recorded meditation. There will be a PDF for prompts, spreads, and exercises for navigating the themes of this framework. And so, if that is calling to you, doors will open on May 1st. And by May 1st, I will have the links on the show notes below for that particular offering. Alrighty, here's my conversation with Britten LaRue on the topic of Underdog to Diva. Welcome to Healing the Spirit, Britten. Thank you so much for being here. I miss you, and I'm excited to weave this conversation with you.
I'm giddy at being here with you now. Thank you for having me back.
Of course, and it feels so exciting to be weaving this topic together. I was feeling into this right before you came onto the Zoom room, and to me, the framework we're going to talk about today has this like martial and mercurial quality to it. Like there's kind of a trickster energy, and I'm really here for it. So I feel like we should just dive in, but maybe before we do that, it would be good podcasting etiquette to just kind of give you a little space to introduce yourself in case anyone listening isn't familiar with your work or with you. Yeah, anything that's coming up for you today by way of introduction of who you are, what you do, and maybe even some, chart or body graph signatures that you want to share.
Sure. Yes, I'm Britten LaRue. My pronouns are she, her, and I was hearing, as you said, introduce yourself. I was hearing unconventional astrologer come through. It's been a journey to take the word astrologer because I feel quite unconventional in how I relate to the language, but I'm an astrologer. I'm now a published author. I have a book that just came out, Living Astrology. I'm a teacher, lifelong teacher. I was for 20 years in academia in the field of art history. I do some one-on-ones, but I mostly hold larger group containers. And then I really, really love mentoring magical humans, emerging mystics, those who are longing for support as they navigate bringing their gifts to the marketplace, which is really our topic for today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Pisces sun born on March 4th, just like you. We're 12 years apart. And I have a Capricorn moon. I'm Aries rising. So I got some malefic energy surrounding my big Pisces. And I feel like you really see that in my body graph, which is very defined manifesting generator, 3-5, like you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I have all centers except head and ego defined. So plenty of not self there for me to work with. Just you. don't need any more. But yeah, I'm circling back again to human design right now. I go into it in waves. I think
Mm-hmm.
you'd be similar, like where
Same.
it just starts to take over and I'm obsessed and then I back off and like don't think about it for
Mm.
seasons. And I'm kind of curving back into my obsession now that I'm in Heretic Haven with Allison and Kelsey. So, and you. Yeah. So I guess that's an introduction to start with.
Amazing. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about our shared 3-5 profile actually recently. And um, one of our shared teachers, Amy Lee, was talking about how the words that are associated with the 3-5 profile, right? Heretic and martyr, heretic, right? So
Yes.
the third line correlates to martyr, and then the fifth line correlates to heretic, are very religious in association. So I thought that was interesting too, especially thinking about your life card in the tarot being the Hierophant, right? Am I right about that?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I am, and so then the other card there is temperance or
Mm,
art, which I
mhm.
think also kind of has a religious quality to it, kind of
Definitely.
a spiritual something or other, storytelling.
Yeah. Alchemist.
Mm-hmm.
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 Yes.
So I love bringing that in as a way, as a portal into the topic of the day, which is underdog to diva. Um, and I want to give you a little bit of space while also letting listeners know that there's a part one to this introduction of this framework, which is on your podcast, Moon to Moon, where you talk about it. Yeah, you really gave this exposition around the concept. And in this conversation, yeah, I want to kind of maybe give you uh, a little bit of space just to talk about and introduce the concept briefly.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the wonderful title, Underdog to Diva, which is super pokey and singy and silly. Um, it comes from a reading with you where you were holding space for me, and I was navigating some fears and scary feels in
Mm,
my growth as a teacher and as a thought leader. And basically, that people won't like me,
mm,
that I'm going to like lose my audience or some these kinds of fears, which are very common
mhm,
if I raise my prices, or if I have more boundaries around my availability or my access to me, like if I do it the way I want to do it instead of the way I'm anticipating they want it. I had just, these are my own projections, right? My projections onto like a vast audience that I'm afraid will abandon me. So it's like rooted in my
mm,
abandonment fears
mhm.
that it's going to be bad. It's going to be very, very bad if I grow. And you had, and I know that you don't remember this, but
I don't actually, which is comedic to me.
I think it may have been in an Akashic reading, which I don't know, may or may not explain why you don't remember, but I also
Yeah.
like to not hold on to memories from readings too,
Hmm. At
because
least when we're giving, right?
who has the room to hold on to all that, right?
Yeah.
But you had you're always so wonderful at grounding experience in anecdotes and archetypal anecdotes at that. And you were helping me see these pictures, like a picture of Britten the underdog,
Mm,
which is like how you were kind of helping me understand the energetic of my frequency in the early years when you knew
mhm,
me.
mhm,
Um, and energetic where I like didn't show my face very often, whether in Instagram or on camera even. And where I was very like kind of more self-effacing and
mhm,
self-deprecating,
mhm,
and like very willing to bend to just be of support to anyone that is interested in what I want to do.
mm,
And just like be available. And that was coming from like a puppy underdog energy of just like being so excited to be participating in the world with my mystical gifts and my astrological teachings, and just like whatever you need, I'll make it possible. Which it's adorable,
mm,
it's so sweet. but also as I was growing, just realizing, actually, this is more what I want to do, and I think
Mhm.
this would be a fun creative shift, and I think I might like to explore that option, and then just starting to feel like, ooh, I'm not sure everyone liked that move. Oh, like navigating that. Then you framed these kinds of shifts into more of like Britain showing her face in Instagram, being more having higher prices, just the natural shifts one does make, being like the diva frequency that I was
Mhm.
coming into. And one of
Yeah.
the points you made was that you always saw me as both, like inherently even when I was in my quote unquote underdog phase, you always saw like the diva Britain
Mhm. That's
available.
true. Yeah.
And like that I'm also always an underdog too. And so
Mhm.
and that framing was really helpful. And then last fall, I was talking to a woman that I have as a business coach. And I was talking about, I was like, I frame it like this, that the underdog and the underdog Britain and the diva Britain. And she was like, well, you could even tell a story around that. Like you could call it
Mm.
underdog to
Mhm.
diva. And I was like, I felt like ripples through the universe, like,
The
yeah,
opening credits rolled in.
the pathway is appearing.
Mhm.
And so it basically then has been talking to me since fall, um, especially through my mentoring capacity. It's like to me, it's very different to be a teacher than to be a mentor.
Mm.
And I really love to do both.
Mhm.
Um, the mentor hat is a little different, and what comes up in terms of like what kinds of support um, do I feel someone longing for? And a lot of times that support feels like the energetic permission to um, to open the embodiment beyond kind of uh, like the underdog frequency into something more expansive that comes from a desire place and a dream space, and
Mm.
the accompanying fear that my desires won't be liked, or my desires, you know some people might not think those are good for them, and
Mhm.
my desire might hurt people, my desire might be uncomfortable for people, and this fear around that kind of self-expression, which I feel like is something that I'm really here to talk about, because
Mm.
this is so much of my Chiron path as someone with Chiron and Taurus, working on self-worth and learning how to give herself, learning how to receive, you know.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, that pathway seems to be one that um, I feel a lot of resonance with other human beings around those kinds of permissions.
Mhm.
So I wanted to create a framework and a forum for having honest conversations around the fact that we have this marketplace. And in my podcast episode, I refer to it as the marketplace reality, because it is like a version of reality, the
Mhm.
version where we have dollar signs and prices, and there are actual numbers attached to the name of our offering. These are real. They're real. And this
Mhm.
is a marketplace that where we can have a lot of wounds, we have a lot of stories, we have a lot of like confusions. We also have a lot of like joys, like it's when we buy things or receive things that feel really good. Like it's a whole universe, it is super real. And I don't the marketplace reality is, to me, as a Pisces, who likes to feel into multiple realities, it's not the only reality. There's also a reality where we all know and are connected to our inner divinity that's not related to things like price points, raising your prices. um, where there's a way that we can feel connected to people that's sort of beyond the fact of money and the
Mm-hmm.
fact of what all that carries for us, especially for our inner children. And what would it be like to participate in a marketplace feeling deeper into the divinity parts of us as opposed to like the kind of gnarly weird parts of us that have to negotiate through like the frames of inner children, the frames of our lineages, the frames of um, the harms of capitalism.
Mm.
Um, and we just want to be out there having a good time connecting with people and
Mm-hmm.
being of service to this world. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like Underdog to Diva, I'm just learning this framework. You know that I don't need to know all that a framework is before I introduce it. But to me, it's feeling like a really zesty place and a playful zone for having like honest conversations and supporting ourselves through a set of resources to help us with navigating these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that, Britain. You kind of unpacked a lot there, so I'm going to go in there and I'm
Yeah.
going to pick out a couple things from here. So, the first thing that I really want to point out is again to kind of bring it back to like this martial trickster energy that I was sensing into. Um, the first one was I kind of wanted to respond to the underdog to diva phrasing that came out during the reading between you and I because I was thinking about that and I can't remember the reading where it happened. And also since you told me, I was like, what was how does that phrase make sense to me in terms of our relationship right now? Right? I was kind of
Mhm.
grounding it in present time. And what I realized was um, behind every creator, there's a human being, right? And that human being contains multitudes. And I think that part of us participating as creators, as practitioners, as business owners in the marketplace is we have to engage with some level of the projection field, right? There is no way that when I go in to a reading, say, or I teach a class, that I can accurately convey within 2 hours, right, or an hour of that reading time or that class time, the entirety of my lived experience, right? People will always just see me through a certain screen. And I think in some sense, there's a quality in which going into market with our creations as creators necessitate that we kind of play with some of these roles, right? And like there is the person who is the customer and then there's the person who is the seller, but the reality is like a lot of those roles are kind of made up, you know, and we kind of create
Mhm.
the conditions through unconscious roles that we play or conscious roles that we play when we enter into these agreements, right? And then the other thing that I was thinking about too as you were speaking was how the fact of the marketplace is so fascinating to me, Britton, because you pointed something in the Moon to Moon episode that really struck me. This is something I've been thinking a lot about, but I think the way that you phrased it made a lot of sense to me, which is that we all participate and we're all implicated in the marketplace, right? And in the economy, even when we're not the one kind of going out there making the money. Like, even if it's our spouse making the money, or even if we have access to some sort of generational wealth, we all have to participate in the marketplace in one shape or another, right? So, I'm curious to have you maybe talk a little bit more about this, particularly around your relationship with the marketplace and how it's evolved and how it's shifted since you started your astrology practice to now. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yes, so thank you. Yeah, I do. I really do feel like I, th- we our relationship to how we engage with the marketplace is a relationship like all other relationships where we bring to it a certain set of, presumptions, motivations, biases, goals, um, desires. And uh, I was raised by a set of women through the generations who are white women, white American women, some more recently immigrants, but the name of the game is you marry well, in quotes. Marrying well means someone who's going to protect you from working
Mm.
because it is like not a thing to get dirty with money. This was very confusing to me, given that I was also receiving this education that was like a girls' school, but it was all about, follow your dreams. There are no ceilings. You can be anything you want. And it's like preparing you to go out and be whatever success is going to look like for you. And it was very confusing for my younger self, who's like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what I'm supposed to do. Someone, what am I supposed to get the money myself or
Mm.
marry someone who gets the money? I
Mhm.
I don't understand what I'm supposed to do,
Mm.
So I had a lot of self-esteem when it came to engaging in the world with my ideas and producing language and argument that is compelling and zingy and persuasive. But I was terrified to figure out what to do with my gifts, which also included just like a lot of emotional wisdom, like where does one put a price on that somewhere? I guess I'll put
Mhm.
that towards being a mother. Like it was very confusing what to do with different gifts of mine in compartments because we live in a world that encourages us to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
And so academia was such a safe place for me to stay away from money. Whilst still engaging with your abilities.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and I was terrified of money. I mostly just didn't feel like I had really any guidance or counsel on how to do it in a way that engage with money in a way that would be empowering. And I was terrified it was going to corrupt me. It was going to make me a bad person. But this is my positionality, right? Like everyone has the archetypal stories,
Mm.
the like the moon, the deep lunar underbelly that is shifting how you're thinking about things in ways that may be largely unconscious or mysterious to you.
Yeah.
Like I like to frame my lineage conditioning as damsel, like damsel in distress archetype. Like that is the archetype.
Mhm.
But then I was educated in like strong woman. So it was very confusing. But I got married very young by someone that was like, whew, this is definitely going to keep me safe. All right. Now that's taken care of. Um, because having been through a lot of the traumas I went through as a teenager and in college, there was nothing more important to me than getting my body in a safe place.
Mm.
And that is like a legit choice, for a lot of human beings is to find a partnership where you can find safety in that. So compassion to my younger self and anyone who's resonating with that story.
Mhm.
But at midlife, I think, thanks to Neptune on my sun in many ways, where I was like dissolving this need and opening into a different kind of need. I really wanted to experience participation where I put myself out there and just saw what could happen.
Mm.
And so I really didn't experience Britain in like the scrappy hustler player kind of marketplace until 40, 41 years old. So
Mm.
I've been, it's all
Mhm.
fresh learning, which I think
Mhm.
makes for some of the greatest teaching material is like the 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 fresh tests. But doing this work, I have really like done some underworld passages with my elitism, my damsel, and like really met myself in deep, deep places, ancestral places, sitting with hard material,
Mm.
facing deep, deep, deep fears, terrors, even. And because I love sharing myself so much. And that puppy energy that I talk about in the podcast is what is like a really delicious energy to be in when you're a newcomer to the marketplace and an
Mm.
underdog.
Mhm.
The puppy energy really carried me through the terrors um,
Mhm.
that came with it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I feel like that puppy spirit is very tied to that kind of divine part of us that is just so excited to be here on this planet and share ourselves and just kind of spread like this abundant light all around in spite of all the other stuff that comes up. Yeah, I kind of lost your question, so you may have to bring me back.
I love that though. Um, I'm kind of wanting to share a few reflections from what you shared, from my own experience that I
Mhm.
feel are kind of resonating with me, and relating to parts of your story, which is to me, um, this is totally different, right? Like a completely different context, a completely different body. But I would say that in many ways, I was raised to embody this archetype of like the good salaryman, like someone who like shows up and like do the hard work and um, work, come in earlier than everybody else, go home later than everybody else. Like that was what was the virtue signaling, in the communities and even to a certain extent the family in which I grew up, and as someone who has always felt themselves to be an artist, it was really challenging to then kind of feel into how the path of the artist is not always necessarily linear, and that I've had to break away from that good worker archetype in order to figure out what the artist path actually looks like for me specifically, right? Because one of the, I think, weirdest feature of like walking the artist path, which by the way, I also see you walking the artist path, Britten, like big time in your journey. It's so funny to me that looking back a couple years ago, you had maybe told me in a private conversation that you don't really resonate with the word artist. I'm like, that is interesting. She's one of the most creative and artistic people I know.
Aw.
And truly, truly. And I think in some ways it is through your mentorship and our collaboration and like the courses that we created together that I learned how to, the mechanisms of what it means to be in that trial error process, right? Earlier in this conversation, we were bringing up the 3-5 aspect of our body graph, right? Our profile. I think there's something about the artist's path that does require and necessitate a certain level of making a lot of different mistakes, right? And bumping into things left and right and breaking some things, hurting some people's feelings, right? And even just creating something that didn't get any reaction, which to me is like that is one of the scariest things, right? Like if
Yes.
I trigger people, at least there's a reaction. Like if there's no reaction, that's so sad, right? And there's a quality about that that I think requires one to kind of get out of this, like for me in my own lived experience, get out of that salaryman archetype into like maybe more of the rebel or artist or crazy scientist archetype, right? That
Mm.
um, will help me then find my path, you know? But you can't really find that path if you stay in that salaryman or in that damsel archetype,
No.
right? In some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, thank you
Mm.
for sharing that and adding that in. Yeah. I just, so much energy was going towards like dutiful wife energy too, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And so once that got freed up, it's like, what's my duty too? Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And, man, just like the anger and the resentment and the frustration that I was constantly trying to shove down
Mm.
those years of just trying to be a good person, hold to the contract I'd made,
Mm-hmm.
don't be a bad mother, you know. That shame language around holding to what you said you do um, kept me like a bottled up um, geyser. You know, I was just
Mm.
very, sometimes I would just unleash frustrations like in ways that then I would feel so horrible. And, those things don't happen anymore because I'm regularly unleashing a lot through my creativity. Right? I know
Yeah.
myself as like a spirit of energy in
Mm-hmm.
ways that feel um, loving.
Yeah. 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 And this is reminding me of something that one of my coaches, Wendy May, recently reminded me of. I feel like I've heard this somewhere and stored it in the back of my brain, but when she said it, it came alive in a way that was new to me, or like that felt like, oh, my body's finally ready to receive this wisdom, which was she was talking about how energies like anger, right, or frustration really are energetic phenomenon, right? And they carry a certain charge to them. And you can play with these energies to create what you want. Like they can become creative energy with the right kind of wielding, right? And um, thinking about our creativity too, like there's a way in which tapping into anger or frustration and getting curious about the intensity of that energy can help us turn it into something that can be of service, right? And can be helpful not just to ourselves, but to people that we're in connection with, as our audience or our client or our customers or our students. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what I've learned over these years that's part of the underdog to diva framework comes from now seeing frustration, resentment as really beautiful information
Mm.
for me to honor to be more in my desire in this
Hmm.
path. The
Hmm.
scary part has been a like what will it be like to experience like this projected blowback that I might
Hmm.
experience if I say, I actually don't want to do that many lives. That makes me tired. Or like, you know what? I don't want to do email follow-ups. No, I don't think that I think it's beautiful the way it was actually.
Mm.
I don't think that, as I started to realize like I'm frustrated because rah, um, I don't want that energy in the space with my students and clients,
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
my responsibility to identify that and then my responsibility to put the boundaries around that so that the people I'm serving can feel me in my juicy, buoyant, excited pleasure energy, which
Mm-hmm.
is really what we want to put. I presume people want to put their money on, but it's very difficult for the scared parts of me to trust that when I'm worried about like being yelled at. And for the record,
Mm,
I have been yelled at. Like
mm,
the actual imagined fears have happened
mm.
for me. But honestly, these experiences have fortified my trust in myself because
Mm,
when I avoid the thing that I'm most afraid of, I'm shutting down my desire. I'm shutting
mm.
down my creativity.
Yeah.
But as I see that I have the tools to sit through and survive, and learn from the challenges that have come up along the way, it opens my desire up for more information so I can see the new directions of my creativity. So, um, trial and error, like I don't mind the bumps and the bruises along the way because they actually end up helping me get more information every time I go through another round,
Mm-hmm.
around what's the vision now? Okay, you lived through it.
Yeah.
What's the vision now? And then it just gets more fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Britton, if you can speak a little bit more on how, what are some of the practices, what are some of the things you found to be helpful, the support that you put in place as you're tending to yourself when some of your worst fears materialize?
Mm-hmm. Well, emotional authority, I go through a little spiral. Um,
You go surfing the waves.
yes. I have learned in part from you, in part from other very wise, emotionally resilient human beings in my life who know themselves, that it's actually really great when I can just let it um, let it myself move through it. Maybe I tell the people that I need support from about it, but I'm not tangling you in. Actually tangling other people in tends to make things worse. So I like to trust those humans that I know will like just be able to reflect back like that sounds really hard basically, and then just
Yeah.
let me have my experience.
Mm,
It's
mm-hmm.
usually it'll fall away. And then meanwhile, doing a lot of talking to my inner children and letting them know everything's okay, that I'm here. I just have to tune in rather than numb out, actually, and just like
Mm-hmm.
kind of allow myself to feel things.
Mm.
Um, Anger is one of the last ones that I will go to because I'm usually looking for reasons that the person is right.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Like from shame programming. I
Mm-hmm.
think we all have this to a
Yeah.
degree. Maybe some people go straight to fight. So that's not really true. For me, my programming is that the person's probably right. And there's something that I'm supposed to learn from this.
Mm,
And so I
mm-hmm.
like make myself stay with what they're saying to look for the proof that it's true. This has not
Mm.
been helpful. In this process of going through um, these spiky times where
Mm-hmm.
I have triggered someone and they wanted to blame me for their experience, has allowed me to notice that I have that pattern actually and just recognize that,
Mm.
like, no, you can scan yourself for like, do you feel good about what you put out there? Are you proud of the words that you put into this world? All right. Well, you don't have to look for something true in this critique, in this
Mm-hmm.
this heckler. Um,
Yeah.
and just it's almost scarier for me to let it be true that someone's just um blaming me for their
Mm.
own wounds,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like harder for me to understand that that's the reality than it is for me to just go ahead and take responsibility.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
because if you get used to enduring responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easier than accepting the world is that way, the way
Yeah.
of someone just projecting their wounded story on you and expecting you to hold it for them, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting, Britton. As you were speaking, I was seeing imagery actually, like the energy moving on a visual level. And what I'm seeing is as you take on the energy, right, of the other person, like their frustration or their maybe even straight up like hatred, right? It's almost like it creates a certain balancing energetically that makes it a little bit easier to carry rather
Mhm.
than if you let the tension be there, right? When the tension is there, it's almost like where do we even go from here? And when we have this is making me think about like birth order, like I'm going to divulge my own birth order
Yes.
here, which is as like the older child, right? In terms of like birth order, I've felt like one of the subliminal messages I received was that it was very important for me to solve the problem. Like if I see a
Mhm.
problem, I'm the one responsible to address the problem and to smooth it out, right? And it's taken me many decades to learn that I don't have to diffuse another person's tension, right?
Yes.
It's not my responsibility actually to um, take away someone's pain. Even if I've publicly taken on the role of a healer or a facilitator or a guide or a teacher, it's not my responsibility to carry people's trauma,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. And I'm firstborn as well. I know that one. I think that this is why I think a huge part of Underdog to Diva has to do with inviting yourself to get more and more and more clear about what you've agreed to, like what's in the
Mm,
contract
hmm.
between you and anyone,
Yeah.
and what is not in the contract.
Mm,
And it is a symptom of shame that it can be scary to be the one who gives ourselves permission to have clear contracts.
mm,
But I think that the pathway of underdog to diva is seeing how the more clear we are in what we've agreed to and what we haven't agreed to, like from the random person who's never joined one of your containers that's following you on Instagram
mm,
to the person who's booked like a 6-month contract with you or who buys everything that you do versus the person who comes to your free webinar, the person who buys your book who you've never interfaced with. Like, what have you said you would do and what did you
mm,
not? Um,
mm,
and I think that the I've felt like I've had to mature in the reality that even as I get more and more and more clear about that, there will be, I can't control what anyone else assumes in this relationship. Um,
totally. Totally.
and that's very vulnerable because you
It
can't
is.
control it,
It is. Yeah. So this is making me think about something that has been on my mind a lot, Britton, which is that when people are interacting with us, they're not just interacting on an individual level, right? That they're also interacting with um, archetypes that we represent for them on an
Mhm.
unconscious level, right? Like, for example, I was noticing this actually throughout our collaborations. I could sense that there were expectations that people were putting on you because you are in a female body that they were not putting on me because I'm not in a female body. right?
Mhm.
There's expectations that we place on people who are femme that we don't put on people who are masc, and vice versa, right? Like I remember sometimes when I'm teaching, I have to continually remind myself that I am not responsible to have all the answers because there's this unconscious projection that I'm in a male body and I'm supposed to be the father who has all the answers. I'm not. I never co-signed to that, but it's there, right? It's there. And I think part of the work in being a skillful practitioner is noticing when that's happening
Yes.
and making an aligned choice, right? Making a choice that feels really true to what you're available for in that moment. So I want to pause on this idea of contract, Britton. Do you want to talk a little bit more about contract? Like, what is it? I'm just feeling into how some people listening to us might be like, well, what do they mean when they talk about contracts? So maybe like a little bit of a dictionary definition and also your own unique understanding based on your experience, um, your own conception of what contract means.
Yes. Well, my regular use of this word is absolutely and completely influenced by our shared teacher, Deborah Cremens,
Hmm.
who is a medical
Shout out
intuitive,
to Deborah.
and yes, an intuitive healing teacher extraordinaire.
Hmm.
And so you and I have a lot of shared vocabulary from both having studied with Deborah, and contracts is a word that we use a lot because it's extremely helpful.
Yeah.
So I think about contracts really as a set of agreements that parties have come to, except what's the interesting contracts are maybe not as much the written contracts where people sign as much as the energetic contracts,
Mm.
the energy of the assumption or the energy of the archetype, the energy of how one relates to someone like that person according to some mysterious background. Like we're usually not even very conscious of these things.
Hmm.
And so it was Deborah that first had me thinking about how we can have a contract with any human being, contracts with ourselves, contracts with types of experiences,
Hmm.
contracts with a type of language or a type of place. You can have a contract really with anything in terms of like what you think the agreements are.
Yeah.
And then as you get more skilled at noticing how you do it, you can begin to notice the subtleties of feeling that you can sense that someone is thinking or feeling like a certain set of agreements is in your contract that these have not been explicit,
Hmm.
and you can begin to notice, and that can be very helpful so that you can shift the energy to like, let me dispel a confusion around this agreement,
Yeah.
actually. Um, and a lot of like studying projection and how we see people as screens to help us understand the reality that everything's cohering around for us helps us really understand like what we're putting on people and what we bring to people, so we can
Mm.
begin to take some responsibility for that and call those projections back home. Like we can't totally help it. I think we're projecting constantly, but if whatever stories you have about anyone who looks like me, talks like me, vibes like me, from big sister energy to pretty girl energy to white woman, middle-aged white woman energy to soccer mom energy to expert energy, like whatever archetype is like lighting up for you about me is going to show up probably in how you contract with me. And it
Yeah.
is something that you can then become aware of. It's not to shame it because we're always doing this. It helps.
Mm.
This is how we make sense of reality. This is just what
Yeah.
we do. It's part of being a fascinating human being but you can call your power back from wherever you've given some to me. So example, that like really doesn't need to be mine,
Mm,
or
mhm.
you can call responsibility back. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm really interested in empowering, so and supporting human beings and being resourceful for themselves and for their creativity. So it's really important for me not to play to someone's projection and
Mm,
like just kind of um like play the role for them,
mhm.
because maybe the most important thing that could happen in my role with them in their lives is that I disrupt the projection onto the contract that they believe they're making with me, if that is coming through the way
Yeah.
I'm seeing it in my mind. I
Yeah.
feel like my role is to stay so solid in myself and so crystal clear in myself that um, I can be whatever someone's projection is of me and play the role that they need me to be in their script. And I know where I am, and I'm not going to get confused about that. That
Mm,
feels like my learning path.
yeah.
And then to teach about this to support other humans in navigating the way that we make contracts from projections and money is involved, you know?
Mm, mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I'm also seeing the ways in which, at various points in my life, I've been that person who previews the contract and then make sure that I don't show up according to that person's contract in order to or their projection of me in order to avoid some of the potential pain that I see. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because there's a way in which, on the one end of the spectrum, we can be totally innocent and just walk into a situation and then realize, oh, apparently this person had this unconscious contract with me. Right. And then on the other hand, we can be so hyper vigilant and like essentially anticipate all of the ways in which things could go sideways and then
Mhm.
do the best we can to not have it go sideways. And I think both of these spectrums of experiences are responding from some sort of fear mechanism, right? That I think there's something about actually staying in the present moment and being available and creating lots of space for any kind of projections to come up and to be dispelled in their own ways and in their own time that I think has so much magic, but it does require a lot of skill. It does require a lot of patience to do that, right? And it does require you to also, especially if you are the practitioner or the creator, to make space for all the big emotions that come with that. Because I
Mhm.
think grief can really come up, anger can really come up, right? Frustration can really come up, and shame can really come up. And I think part of the process of transforming these larger energies that are stickier and that we tend to avoid is actually to make space for them, to really give ourselves um, a lot of energetic space to see what they're about, and then over time, like see what's actually behind them. Mhm.
Mhm.
There tends
Yeah.
to be a lot of wisdom actually underneath those emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like if I need someone to um validate that I'm like doing a good job as a good teacher or something like this, so then they have to mask that they're actually, kind of moving through a process of being in my presence for whatever reason, then I'm like hooking them into my own contract need that they validate me.
Mm.
Like, didn't you understand that I'm someone who wants to be validated? Like, I don't want that in my
Mm.
contract with someone
Mhm.
because I would like to give someone the space to kind of spiral through whatever needs, whatever is for their path.
Mhm.
But for me, then it's like I also need to think about from my end, what are my deal breakers or what are my boundaries for like what is just not okay in my space that I'm generously making available for that,
Yeah. Right.
you know?
Right.
And what's fine, take your space, and what is
Mm.
like, this is not going to be okay.
Mm. Mhm.
Removal,
Yeah. Yeah.
that those kind of learning that I'm allowed to have the fine lines of deal breakers, even as I hold a very, what I feel to be a generous and an expansive space for other human beings to move through their process, has been something I've had to spend time allowing myself to have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I feel like when we come back to this like marketplace reality situation, we live in a culture where we bring certain assumptions to the exchange of money, along with things like customers always right, or
Mm.
like, refunds if not satisfied, or certain presumptions around like good customer service. And this is what it looks like, and just not wanting that in my contract. Like,
Mm.
what would it be like to, yes, I know I'm in the marketplace, but those things are not in this contract, actually.
Mhm.
We're not
Mhm.
moving from these presumptions that
Mm.
you just get a refund, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so inviting listeners to feel into like, what in your imagination, like what does it look like in terms of what are the relational dynamics that you would want in a contract that are different from the relational contracts that we currently have, like the
Yeah.
customer is always right.
Yeah.
Like, what does that contract feel like to the
Mm.
creator, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, I think these types of things are very sticky, and I don't have answers. I just really like poking at this
Mm.
to kind of create a new way from through the experience of engaging with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I want to ask if you would like to share, Britton, a little bit more about. I'd love to have you speak more to this idea, right? Of like not wanting to have the contract of like the customer is always right. My sense is that a lot of people feel this. Like some people, there's a population of people who are like, I can't be bothered to deal with that kind of stuff. I'm just going to give you what you want and you can just leave my space, right? There's that kind of people. And then there's the kind of people who are like, no, like this doesn't feel good to me. This doesn't feel right. And I think sometimes it can feel very hard to validate that for ourselves, to really validate that this is the kind of relationship that I want to have in my container. I'm curious to hear you speak more about that, actually. How did you come to a point where you um, release any sort of people pleasing tendencies that may come up when thinking about having a contract with customers or people who are paying? Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting too, because I feel that between one-on-one readings as a sales zone, and
Mm.
then teaching as another sales zone, and then having a shop as another sales zone. They're all a little bit different in terms of
Mm.
navigating communications and customer service. And certainly, it's a very different vibe in retail,
Mm.
um, where I don't like how it feels. Um, the expectations that I feel around urgency to like respond to things immediately, and what are you going to do? I'm an upset customer. It's really unpleasant, and really letting myself stick with this has been a rough learning process, because I
Mm.
believe in my workbooks and I believe in books as powerful tools, and I don't want to quit. But the navigating customer service in retail is not fun.
Mm.
Um, and I've been embarking on an expansion in my career this last few months, where I have someone wonderful supporting me with communications and customer service. And I've been able to see a kind of grotesqueness to this process, whereby if someone's not speaking to me and they don't know who this person is, and it feels like just like the way we can feel about bots, or like people on the other side of the world who are answering calls. I really don't like seeing this in humans,
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
but it's important for me to untangle from being stuck in my email box all day if I want to be growing my offerings and the kinds of things I'm trying to put out in the world.
Yeah.
And but I think that one of the main things that I really don't like is this feeling of like this contract idea that I'm supposed to be grateful that someone is buying from me, and like, you're gonna lose my business if you're not doing what I'm telling you I want you to do. And
Mm.
to me, that is just like a contract release moment of just like, okay, bye. Just like, no, no,
Mm.
like underdog to diva, no, you
Mhm.
know? Um, I really, really been just teaching me a lot about the world, that I think the innocent parts of me have not wanted to look at.
Mm.
Childlike parts of me have wanted to
Mhm.
just kind of escape into a
Yeah.
don't- not seeing this, not seeing it.
Mhm.
It's kind of
Mhm.
I probably would call that a Pisces part of me. Um, but here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is how
Yeah.
we treat each other in many cases.
Mhm.
And I know that a lot of incredibly talented, magical, beautiful creators in this world are scared to expand what they can offer because of having to navigate these dehumanizing and demeaning experiences. And how do
Yeah.
you set boundaries when you're also trying to grow grow a business that is going to be able to feel fun and pleasurable and supportive to you and your family
Mhm.
potentially.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lack of awareness and consciousness. I even can see this within myself around how various industries have shaped our behaviors as customers.
Hmm.
I don't actually think that some of these behaviors are innate to like human nature. I think they're actually something that we've been conditioned to be okay behaviors. Like, I think that this is something that we see because we're generally dealing with huge corporations, right? And
Yeah.
we constantly are, as customers, as individual customers, the only way we can kind of take back some of our power is to um, behave in a sense like belligerently as like the disgruntled customer to get what we want. I
Hmm.
definitely think there's a small population of people who are playing trickster, and kind of going doing some things that are maybe unsavory in order to get what they want. But I think for most people, they just legitimately have trained behaviors and they've never really sat down to reflect on how that behavior is actually out of alignment, maybe with their value as humans. Like,
Yeah.
would you say some of these things you say to customer service people to a live human being that's in front of you? I think most of the time the answer is no. Like when we really sit down and see this person as a human being, the answer is no. But our lenses, like, it's not really our energy. You know, it's like someone else's energy that has been inhabiting our body and in training us around how to behave and how to react in certain situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been my mind was totally blown recently by an email from Amanda Yates Garcia speaking to this the Western ontological view
Mm,
that everything is about our rights and like my
mm,
rights,
mm,
my rights as a citizen, my rights as a landowner, my rights as a customer in this case.
mhm, mhm.
And that from another point of view, like an indigenous point of view, it could be where everything is about relationship and about supporting the relationship
Mhm.
between beings in the land, between beings and whatever it is that we're passing between us and sharing between us. And just really feeling deeply into this invitation to feel into, um, yeah, like wanting to have a contract in my business that is all about relationality. And so what is that going to mean that I need to have for my boundaries as I navigate this and basically like educate and show like this is what it looks like, since it's not the presumed behavior. And like
Yeah.
you say, it's I think this is totally an unlearning we can do. Like I really
Mhm,
believe in us.
mhm,
Um
mhm.
And but so what will I need for myself or like anyone listening as we set that up and take on having a different paradigm inside of our business
Yeah.
and holding to it from a love place, but a deeply boundaried place.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. One of the taglines you shared for Underdog to Diva was the energetics of navigating the marketplace in devotion to your divinity.
Hmm.
And as I was sitting with this phrasing, I was thinking about that story of Jesus in the Bible, like flipping the merchant's table in front of the temple. Like superficially, I think there's a little bit of a contrast here, right? Often when we think about our spirituality or our divinity, we don't think about the marketplace, we don't think about money. I'm curious to have you share a snapshot from your journey teaching, mentoring, giving astrology readings where you come into contact with your divinity specifically through your participation in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel that I'll just use the example of promo.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, like promo's my favorite thing. And I know that that's a little unusual. I know that I hear so often humans saying things like, I don't know anything about marketing, or I'm terrible at social media, or there's this fear around promotion.
Mhm.
And I feel for me like it is when I am most in contact with this kind of joyful divine self that is conversing with the being of my offering and the guides around that. And it is like a deeply creative, mystical process of showing up to basically magnetize. those who want to come play, those that the being's trying to get to. Like, I like to think of it as like the being of the offering is trying to get to these humans,
Mm.
and they have chosen me as the mouthpiece, basically, for getting the word out that it's there for them. That so I can I'm the bridge between human and offer,
Mm.
and like being in that dance is extremely joyous for me, and it feels very bright,
Mm.
which feels like part of this like divinity inside of myself.
Mhm.
I like to visualize this as a circle and a square.
Mhm.
Like the circle of spirit is it's kind of like the roll card or the universe card of like the circle, this like bright dancing circle. And then I see the corners as being like the fixed elements, the fixed sign symbols. And I associate they're like the protectors of the spirit inside. So I see this as like our relationship to self-worth through Taurus, relationship to self-love through Leo, our relationship to self-trust through Scorpio, and then self-esteem, fixed air, Aquarius. And that this has nothing to do with your placements. This has to do with the energetic and the way of being of like fixity in the element. And then the guidance of the ruler of that sign. And that these parts of you are what support those boundaries and the deal breakers, to facilitate the structure for you to share your divinity. Like it's the structure for the sharing. And in that sense, it is Saturnian. Um, and Saturn is the planet that we associate with that card. And in the workshop, this is going to be what we're doing, is like getting gnarly with this framework through through the world card, basically,
Mhm.
and Wheel of Fortune, because we also see that in Wheel of Fortune with Jupiter and like playing with the circle, as in the external circumstances that turn perceived fortune and misfortune, that have
Mm.
everything to do with our projections about what success or failure are, or winning or losing.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm blanking a little at your question, but for me, I feel like anything that I can sense is like a drain or a limit or a block on me being in that big ball of light
Mm.
that I have to trust is what I'm meant to be sharing. I just
Mhm.
have to.
Mhm.
Whatever comes up as like, this is not really feeling as good, or I
Mm.
feel resistance, I'm feeling contraction. That's the evidence that there's something to play around with, really, through those four pillars to
Mm.
help me kind of shore things up and get back into that divinity place. And in doing that, it becomes really clear how to support others, because it's so obvious when I look at other people how divine they are.
Mm.
It's harder to see that in myself,
Yeah.
that's been the path. So I see it in others, and then you can sense where like something is confused from conditioning, like, often through like moon material,
Mhm. Mhm.
to help them, because I just have deep conviction that like we all human beings are so divine. We are divine, and we all have these huge lights to share with each other, in spite of everything. Yeah, it's a messy place, this planet, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we have this like fact of the marketplace. Okay,
Mm.
that's here.
Mhm.
Can't escape it. Not going to
Mhm.
pretend, because it's easier to pretend that it's not there.
Yeah.
No, it's there.
Mhm.
So, what do we do? Do we just crumble, collapse, give up? I just no. Um, but I think the more we can talk about these things, the more we open up the imagination to
Mm,
new ways, you know?
yeah, yeah, I love that. Um, I'm also thinking about something we've talked about kind of off the record around evolving relationships with potentially tricky concepts, right? Like, I think part of why bringing things to market, whether commercially or even just literally sharing it with other people through like an Instagram post that nobody has to pay for, right? Um, can be challenging. Like there are some of these concepts that I think the way that we engage with them, at least the way that I track we're engaging with them on a collective level, is very much mired in. Um, I'm not a huge fan of this particular language, but it kind of feels like very kind of old world, like masculine way of doing business, right? Things like engagement or stats, right? Like follower counts, likes, comments, or things like how much income we make, how much profit or loss that we're making, right? And you and I were talking about even the idea of like mastery, which is something that I always have a little thing that I've always had to work around, right? Like mastery or excellence. This can be really challenging, or even things like clearly communicating your messages. I've been thinking about how, as someone who is pretty neurospicy and who works with a lot of neurospicy people, like that can be really triggering because the thinking or the picture that lights up in my head when I think about clearly um, languaging my um, clearly articulating my message, what comes up is like PowerPoints, right? Men in suits, like
Mhm.
business school presentations. And so um, I think there's something here about creating like healthy, flowing, dynamic relationship with these concepts, right? And I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how you've come to um, move through this evolution, and again bringing back this idea of underdog to diva, right? Of allowing yourself to engage with some of these concepts, like how many people are buying my books, right? Or like how much money is my courses making, in a way that can feel exciting, in a way that can feel life-giving rather than yet another trap.
Yeah.
Because my sense is that it has a lot to do with how we engage with these concepts, right? And even how we engage with some of the old world strategies, more so than like the strategies themselves or the concepts themselves. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, there's I really believe there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a larger audience, with wanting to make a lot of money in your creative work or your spiritual work, right? With wanting to have um, deep mastery over your skill sets, and the things that you are devoted to, wanting to create products that are excellent. I think these are really beautiful desires and dreams, and also part of why they can be so challenging is that we orient to them from a place of should, right? Like this is how we should be. And then there's a lot of shame and pain and fear that are kind of stuck in there that somehow also gets transferred with the final product. So, yeah, I think I'm going to pause there and see if you have anything to share.
Yeah. I one of my sayings that I teach, especially in the seeding the year framework, is there's no such thing as potential.
Mm,
And potential is a fantasy that shames the present moment. And that this is something that we put on astrology and charts a lot, is this idea of like unlock your potential or find your purpose.
mm,
The chart is like some kind of tool to get us to our purpose, because shit, we got to find our purpose, or we're terrible adults, like what kind of adult am I? Like what if I die and I haven't figured out my purpose is?
Mm.
Like, is my whole life a failure? Like this
Mhm.
is all the conditioning. And I think these are tied to the same types of programming that we have around performance and results. Like what are the results that you're waiting for to give yourself love? You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
what
Mhm.
what are you waiting for? Like what outcome will be enough to love yourself?
Mhm.
Like how will you know?
Mhm.
And this is just deeply flawed, because it's putting everything out in a future and not loving who you are right now. So for me, I feel like the first order of business is in a kind of like a Nana underworld journey way to like actually put some of these concepts on a meat hook and let them die and like experience the grief and the anger and all of the gnarly like underworld Ereshkigal Gill Queen energy around like I fucking hate this
Mm.
setup, and just let yourself feel all that and come into this energy of like, well, now that that's over with, what do I really want to do? And then like letting the spirit of what you really want to do, like start to come through and like lighten things up, like literally lighten things up with
Yeah.
fire
Right.
and clear it. It's totally cyclical. But I do think they're big words I have on meat hooks. Like marriage is one that I'm like, maybe that doesn't need to be on a meat hook. I don't know. I have a lot of different ideas on meat hooks. And in the story, at some point, our underworld body will be like, I think that might be able to come back to life now. Like
Mm.
I'm ready
Mhm.
for that to reanimate
Mhm.
in its new energy, and then
Yeah.
it's like, what do results look like now that I understand that I live
Mm.
here and I create here,
Yeah.
and there is
Yeah.
no potential me that I'm trying to get to.
Mhm.
I actually would really like to make X number on this class,
Mm.
and so what would that be? That'll be fun, and like
Mhm.
I feel like as long as results money results or like follower account and all that stuff is confused with potential self that we're trying to get to out in the future,
Mm.
it will be painful,
Mhm.
and it will
Mhm.
be distorted.
Mm. Mhm.
I feel like
Yeah.
very weepy right now saying this because
Mm.
I'm so passionate about it. But I do feel that something shifted in me where I was like, interested in results again or like interested in numbers being
Mm.
like zesty fascinating um parts of a game that let's see what could happen, um letting my guides support me in like seeing that, not just really pulling it out of my mental zone but actually like feeling that this is what I think it's going to be.
Mm.
So now what do we want to set up to make that happen? And it's coming from a deeply creative place of self-love and joy,
Yeah.
So I think that is like the shift. And it's the same with feeling proud of yourself for your diligence and your devotion to what you care about. It's
Mm.
like it's not because you got the certification and your professors said you did a great job or whatever,
Mhm. Yeah.
but because you just know it in yourself.
Yeah.
uh, it's not because you got so many great testimonials. All of that stuff is just bonus to the inner scaffolding that I was
Mhm.
talking about around
Mhm.
the divinity.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a way in which, or there's a point at which, I'm thinking about that transition point, right, of having put it on the meat hook, as you said, and then taking it off the meat hook, that I feel like for me in my body, it starts to feel like not letting myself at least take a few direction towards that which I deeply desire, but I'm perhaps a little scared of desiring, right? There's a way in which not moving towards that starts to feel like self-abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Like it
Mm.
starts to feel like avoidance, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. I have my journal here, and I love my journal. And I wrote down something like, well, maybe it's many pages back, so I'll just do it from memory. Uh, it was like my what if this avoidance is me agreeing with my scared parts? Um,
Mm.
like when I'm if I find my, which is not often because I'm pretty chatty on Instagram, and I really do participate quite a bit in my creative life, but sometimes I notice a kind of muting that's happened. Like I'll just start
Mm.
to notice there's like a I'm if listeners, my chin's like coming down as I'm kind of contracting in on myself.
Mm.
And in my practice of noticing what's going on with me, I tuned into it, and it's like the longer I'm just kind of contracting in, it's like the more that I'm telling the scared parts of me that they're right to be scared.
Mm.
It could that I'm me, adult me, is agreeing with them
Mm.
that the world is a scary place or whatever it is that they're afraid of. Everyone's going to be mad at me.
Yeah.
Um, and that what I really want in my heart of hearts is to show these scared parts of me that it's we're going to show up, and it's going to be great. And maybe not everyone will like it,
Mm.
but watch this. I bet it's going to feel fun to express this. And then
Mm-hmm.
usually the energy will start to shift as I can like feel my younger parts like relax, knowing that like adult Britain have got this.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? And that
Yeah.
I'm not relying on them to tell
Mm.
me what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I feel your Aries rising and Cap Moon medicine kind of coming through very strongly there. Yeah. I'm thinking about like what that looks like in my system. And I think for me, maybe this also has to do with being, having my rising and my moon be ruled by Mercury. It's been really important for me to come into a very clear awareness of like, are these standards that I'm placing on myself mine or someone else's? you know,
Yeah.
and creating very, very clear standards of like, these are the things that I care about, right? These are the things we're going to put our energies into. And if there's some other thing that ends up landing on the list, then we're going to question that. We're going
Yeah.
to have a little conversation with that. I need to have a little bit of a border patrol agent there, like
Totally.
asking, like, who are you? Where did you come from? Why are you here?
No.
And yeah, I think there's a way in which a lot of these concepts, right, like engagement or success, are so mired in so many other people's stories or like the collective stories that aren't really ours. And
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because and I just want to be clear that like there are times where I don't feel like posting, and this is not a problem because I
Mm-hmm.
just don't, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
fine. I'm
Right.
talking about when I know I have something to say that
Mm-hmm.
I'm avoiding writing, or I'm like kind of circling but nervous. That's more when I'm like, all right, let's sit down. But sometimes like I don't feel like posting.
Sometimes
This is
there's
not a
nothing.
big deal.
Yeah.
But speaking of contracts, just for for anyone listening, if this is helpful, it's a really cool thing to check in on your contract with Instagram. Like,
Mm.
what is my contract with Instagram? What do I believe my contract is with my followers? What do I think that I've agreed to? Or what do I think is the support or the non-support coming my way? There's like all kinds of ways to look at it that can be, in the language of Deborah Cremens, updated, like
Mm.
updating these contracts to what would feel empowering for me, pleasurable for me, restful for me, exciting for me, whatever, in the present moment can really shift things big time. And that
Yeah.
goes for like writing to your mailing list, making a podcast episode, working on a thing, like whatever.
Hmm.
What's your relationship with it, contract wise?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And to realize that there's a lot of leeway sometimes in the contract there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That we can feel a certain kind of pressure, but from my own experience in my experimentation, when you decide to take a break, for example, you usually realize, oh, other people are okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Hmm. Like, I can take a break. Oh, surprise. This is my podcast. I can take a break.
Who's in charge?
Well, I feel like maybe we're coming to a completion, Britton.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you want to share that I maybe should have um, asked or kind of guided us in this conversation that you want to share before we begin to
Oh,
close out?
such a rich, fun, beautiful conversation. I can't
Mm,
think of anything. Yeah.
awesome.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to ask you also to share a little bit about this upcoming workshop that you have with Underdog to Diva, as
Mhm.
well as any other offerings you might have that you want to share with the listeners.
Yes. So it's going to be on May 9th from my 3 to 6. I'm Central Time, so 4 to 7 Eastern.
Hmm.
The doors will open to enroll May 1st. So whenever anyone's listening to this, they may or may not be open. If you're following me on Instagram, it'll be easy to sign up, or you can get on my newsletter. Stay updated. If this is zingy and exciting for you, definitely go to Moon to Moon to hear my episode on this because it has more. I'm considering this episode and my episode on Moon to Moon as like part of the free part of the class.
Mm.
And then I will be linking to the podcast episodes in the classroom space to make sure everyone's had this so that at the workshop, we're actually like getting into it and it's less exposition and setting up the show. And it's more just diving in. And there's going to also be a PDF and a meditation to practice and go deeper on your own time.
Hmm.
I may be rolling out an additional kind of coaching offering from this in anticipation of there being desire to have some personal support around these themes for your business, for those that are like in the nitty gritty.
Hmm.
Um, and other than that, I have my book, Living Astrology, out, which you can buy anywhere, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org, or my website. And yeah, that's it for now, I
Okay,
think. So
cool.
thank you.
Thank you, Britton. So rich and such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank
So
you.
fun. Thank you, Jonathan.